I wanted to welcome everybody to Innovating Through Crisis, Strategic Planning for 2021. I'm your host, Chris Rankin from Ellington Digital. Before we get started, let's go to the next slide and let's talk a few logistics. Just to keep in line with our informal but professional format, I'm encouraging everyone to say hi in the chat functionality. Go ahead and tell us where you hail from and what your role is. The ones who have, this is looking great. This will help with networking. We're going to open up for questions at the end, but don't hesitate typing those questions in as you have them. As we all know that questions are the sign of an innovative mind, and we're all about that on this webinar. Also, just a reminder, we will be recording this webinar and we will provide access to the recording as soon as we can. So keep an eye out for that follow-up email. And for you super savvy social media thought leaders, we look forward to seeing what posts this session inspires. Just please tag Brian, and he has graciously offered that any posts that include the hashtag SI2 and hashtag strategy, he is offering free 30 minutes one-on-one time with him, just in appreciation. And the hashtags are important because that's how we will find that you posted. So let's get down to business. I'm thrilled to introduce Brian Gladden. In addition to all his credentials and experience, detailed here on the screen, Brian is a baseball enthusiast, and he has a true passion for helping companies innovate to survive post-COVID. Thank you so much for being here, Brian.
Thank you, Chris. All right, looks like we still got some folks coming in. They can, I guess, catch up with us unless we don't have any questions now. We'll get into it. I'm just gonna kind of stall for a second. I know people are trying to join in.
That sounds good. While we're letting people join, I do have a question for you. So is your comment about, or does my comment about questions being evidence of an innovative mind, is that kind of a challenge for people to be asking questions and informally interacting with our presentation here?
I would love questions, absolutely. So usually we don't get, sometimes too many on webinars, so definitely want to leave some time at the end. And if there's a burning one and we have time in different sections, we'll touch on them, but at the end we should have plenty of time, so I appreciate that and look forward to answering them. And obviously the goal here is not to make people experts in an hour, but to give some high-level information that they can take back, so appreciate it. All right, how we doing letting people in? Looks like, all right, we're getting some folks in here finally. So I will start moving and people can join us as they see fit. So thanks everybody for being here. And today really what we're talking about, as Chris mentioned, is innovating through crisis, strategic planning 2021. Everybody is kicking off with their strategy plans. And really, we're in a different space than we were a year ago when we did strategic planning. And so today we're going to talk about some of the studies, the outcomes, what's going on, and how to take advantage and actually not just survive, but thrive through COVID and crisis. So the big takeaways that I'm hoping that everyone takes away from today's presentation is: 1, crisis creates opportunity. 2, customer needs and pains should be the focus. And 3, proven frameworks provide a roadmap to capitalize on this next normal. So let's jump in. So crisis and opportunity. Most of us have probably been trying to just survive through this COVID crisis, similar to the past recession, which we're going to touch on in just a minute. We tend to focus internally on cutting costs and cutting employee and streamlining and just trying to survive, when really there is a need to focus on the customer, because we're all customers in many markets. Our needs have changed, and your customers are no different. And so they're looking for you to really help meet their new demands, and these are opportunities. So at a high level, we kind of need to understand what has changed and how is this, from a business perspective, how is this impacting us? In the middle of this forces here is your business model. Consider this your business plan here, one-page business model. There are 4 elements that are impacting us every day, every week, and sometimes more than others on our business. We have market forces, such as new segments appearing, switching costs for our customers, needs changing. Key trends could be technical, which obviously IT and technology is always evolving at a faster pace. Cultural, social trends. Industry forces, competition, new suppliers, new entrants, new substitute products, adjacent markets. All these things are impacting us. And the thing we're going to talk about today, macroeconomic forces. These could be things, obviously, like a disease, COVID, could be war, could be gas prices, the value of the dollar. These are all macroeconomic forces that affect every business model out there. Some more than others, some industries more than others, but obviously COVID has affected the entire globe. It's not just a regional US thing. And you have to understand, how does this impact your customers, and how do you change your model and take advantage of this? Well, I wanted to start with some historic quotes. This isn't anything new about crisis creating opportunity. All the way back to Sun Tzu and The Art of War. In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity. So even then, we recognize that chaos represents an opportunity for innovation. And this one with Plato, necessity is literally the mother of invention. Customers, ourselves included, we're going to figure out a way to get something done, right? Out of necessity, we have to do something, especially in a crisis. And those are many times where we see innovations, new things come to market. We'll touch on this topic of blue oceans, but new blue ocean spaces, things coming about that we've never dreamt of. Question is, where do we focus? How do we take advantage of it? So let's take a quick look at some of the things that are happening now, COVID-19 effects on US business, especially just in 2020. There were 25.3% fewer small businesses open in December of 2020 than there were back in January. This isn't news to anybody, right? Obviously PPP and disaster loans and all these things we see every day. SBA and the government are trying to help us as small businesses. Most of you are small businesses to survive. But many businesses, over a quarter, are going to fail. They have failed. And that's not just because of, we have to blame COVID, but that really exacerbates the fact that those businesses are not set up to meet customer needs. Why are they failing? They're failing because they can't anymore meet the customer needs, whether that's retail or it's a restaurant. Those are the things that you and I are changing every day, the way we actually live and consume services and products. But the second bullet shows why this is an opportunity. Just in Q3 2020 alone, there are more than 1.5 million new business applications in the US. That was double the same period in 2019 before the COVID crisis. So we prove here that in crisis, disruption creates opportunity, especially for entrepreneurs, because a new business starting says, hey, there's a problem here that's not being solved. I'm going to create a business to solve it. And that's where you could be disrupted. You could have new entrants in your businesses. But as a startup, you're really trying to create that new space and find that opportunity. And disruption through a crisis like COVID creates that opportunity. So for us as a small business or a mid-sized business who is currently going, the question is, how do we act like entrepreneurs, find these new customer demands so we're not the 25% that's being disrupted to go out of business? Just in the first half of 2020, we saw an increase in e-commerce equivalent to that of the last 10 years. So 1 decade in just 6 months. That proves that we as consumers are finding ways to meet our demands, right? We have to. We're not just going to lay down and die. We're going to figure out how to get through something, no matter what that is. So how do you, as small, mid-sized firms, take advantage of this opportunity and thrive? Let's go through some examples. And these are nothing new to any of us, right? We've all lived these in the last 12 months. But in a matter of days and weeks, we're seeing what took decades to happen. And this is all through e-commerce, technology, digital transformation in this new innovation space, because we've all had to go online, just like we're doing now in Zoom. This might have been an in-person webinar, not a webinar, but a meeting in the future, in the past, right? And in the future, it probably will be a hybrid. We'll probably never go back to, just doing the way we did things before, because now we have a taste of what's possible. But look at e-commerce. UPS, obviously Amazon, post office, all the delivery places, DHL. We did in 8 weeks in deliveries what it took 10 years to get to. That's massive. Students, we all have probably either students or grandkids or kids right now, whether it's grade school, elementary. I have 2 high school daughters. 250 million kids in 2 weeks went online to learn. Those are significant numbers. Telemedicine, in just a little over 2 weeks, did 10x of what's ever been done in telemedicine. Remote working, we're all doing this now, right? In 3 months, there were 20 times the number of participants that ever did video conferencing before. And then the one on the bottom right that I love the most, Disney Plus did in 5 months what Netflix did in 7 years, the same volume. Because they saw demand, they saw what was happening, we're all on home, we're all online. So the needs of the consumer have changed in all these areas that we're all seeing. And digital transformation is an easy thing to, show as an example and get your head around, because we're all living it. So at the end of the day, crisis creates opportunity. So this axis I've created, the crisis innovation opportunity axis, we can see that as the severity of a crisis goes up, like COVID, the need and opportunity for innovation also goes up, because we've all been disrupted to a more severe level, which means our needs and our pains have changed that would need to be solved for. So you have this opportunity in your business or clients that you help to help them solve this. How do we do this? Well, we focus on customer needs. That's the key, right? Us as consumers as well, we want our needs met. So again, not just looking internally, how do we cut costs and just survive, but how do we make sure that our customers are getting what they need? Whether you like Bezos and Amazon or not, they're great at customer service. And one of his famous quotes I love is, if we can keep our competitors focused on us while we stay focused on the customer, we'll be just fine. So let's see if this actually is just fluff, or is this, real revenue, business, profit generating way to look at business. And the McKinsey studies just recently are proof of this, that if you focus on the customer, you're going to be better off than your competition. And this first graph here is really about focusing on the customer experience. That obviously can mean different things, but it's at the end of the day, whether it's digital or it's in person, it's your customers having a good experience with your product or service. And what this shows, which is really amazing, is here at a baseline of 0, you see most folks, whether they're looking at really focusing on customer experience or not, they're at the same point. Well, in 2008, when we had the recession, financial and housing crisis, you can see a significant difference, right? Over 400% difference between those that were supposed to be very focused on customer experience versus those who did not focus on customer experience. Out of the recession is what is amazing. Out of the recession, those people with studies who are the top 10% of customer experience through surveys and feedback versus the bottom 10% had a 300% higher return for their shareholders than their competition. That's significant. So post-crisis, post-recession, those customers are going to stay with you more loyal because you looked after their needs even through the recession, and you're going to have even a bigger gap between you and your competition. Well, how can they do this? Well, we can look at innovation. So another study here, McKinsey, same articles. History suggests that companies that invest in innovation through a crisis outperform their peers in recovery. Same thing we just saw. Here's a baseline at 100%, looking at those customers or companies in the S&P 500 who are supposed to be the top 10% of innovators versus their rest of their S&P peers. Again, through the crisis 08-09, we see that there's a 10% difference. So significant, but not as big as post, which means not only did they, through the crisis, outperform by 10%, which is a market cap, the 10% value of the company, but post-crisis, the value of their company was 30% higher than their peers in the S&P 500. Again, your customers are going to be more loyal. They're going to stay with you because you met their demands and you're providing things that are solving their problems. The problem, though, is that many of you don't know what tools and process to use to enable this innovation and customer experience. In the COVID crisis, especially, most of you, most executives, whether you're small, mid, large, extra large size business, doesn't matter. We all believe that the COVID crisis is going to fundamentally change the way that we do business, and it's going to impact our customers' needs. How do we innovate to that is the problem. Only 21% of executives actually feel that they have the resources, the skills, and the commitment to actually pursue new growth or innovation successfully. This is where we want to focus today. So if there's 20 of you here on the phone, let's call it 10 of you, then 2 of you probably feel great and you're happy. The other 8 of you probably don't feel so comfortable trying to innovate through COVID or a crisis. And the goal today is to educate you on some of those tools that actually exist that can help you through this. This is a nice graphic I like at McKinsey that also talks about innovating through the COVID crisis. And what we want to focus on here are the 3 boxes I've got highlighted. You all here aspire to actually do better and grow as a business, or you wouldn't be here learning. So what we're going to focus on is choosing, discovering, and evolving. So the beginning steps of innovation. And the first, you as an executive have to choose. How do I go about doing innovation? Well, first of all, it's not just one big thing that's going to work. It's not just a big bang or a silver bullet. It's all about investing in initiatives, which are really tests and experiments to see what's going to work and what's not going to work. But by using proven methods and tools, you can reduce that risk, the uncertainty, the cost of each of these innovations. Over 70% of all product launches fail, or services, doesn't matter. 9 out of 10 new businesses fail. So the question is, how do you improve those probabilities? Well, you have to have multiple initiatives going on, usually at any one time. Could be in serial, but you don't want to just say, oh, here's a good idea, let's go try and put this into the market. That usually fails. By having proven methods, tools, processes, you can then reduce that risk and just go forward with those initiatives that actually are going to meet the customer demand. The next step then is really discovery. Great, we want to choose to do this. We want to set up processes and initiatives. What do I do next? Well, it's not just about coming up with an idea and sitting around brainstorming. It's really about discovery. Have you gone into the market and done customer discovery? Have you validated what their problems are? Getting feedback from the market is really the key to everything. We can all come up with ideas, but again, just like I mentioned a minute ago, most of those will fail unless we validate that our customers and even non-customers actually see value in this. And then evolving. Great, we have this new idea. Someone says it's a problem. We think we can solve it. How do we actually capture that value? Well, you have to evolve your business model. As of a year ago, the average business model only survives 5 years. Back in 2000, that was almost 3 times long. So every year, because things like technology, the availability of, globalization, commoditization of things, the lifespan of your business model is shrinking, getting shorter and shorter. So the question is, how are you evolving your business model so that you can stay in business and continue to be better than your competition? At the end of the day, this is one of my favorite quotes. The bottom line is that innovation can work better when a formal system exists. Most small businesses, especially mid-sized firms, do not have a formal innovation system. Think about strategic planning. You might, at the beginning of the year now, we sit around a table and we say, okay, what did we do last year? Pull out your plan, blow the dust off of it. Gee, we didn't do that. We did this amount revenue. Let's try and do 5% more this year. And gee, we think there's some opportunity here. Let's go do that. That's the normal way of strategic planning. So that's okay at a starting point, but not for innovation when we want to reduce our risk. We've really got to have some formal systems in place that can help us succeed. To do that, I wanted to give you all some insights and some knowledge around some of these leading innovation tools and frameworks. And the goal here is not to make you an expert here in just 20, 30 minutes of time, but to give you an idea of the tools that are available to you, whether you decide to do them yourself and go out and just do a DIY or hire a consultant like me, or get some sort of guidance on how to best use these tools. But at the end of the day, putting some sort of tools, process, frameworks embedded into your strategic planning will help you move forward to actually do these initiatives, stay ahead of your competition, and hopefully thrive through things like COVID. So some of you I know that are here join me, I appreciate that. And we have talked about some of these ideas. So some of the leading innovation methods or frameworks in the world today are things such as the business model canvas, the value proposition canvas, as well as the kind of mindset of jobs to be done we're going to talk about, design thinking, and blue ocean strategy. Some of these might be new terms to you. That's okay. We're going to touch on each of them. But at the end of the day, what's really interesting about all of these leading tools is that the customer is at the center of each of these methods. It's all about what the customer needs to get done, their pains, their jobs, their needs. How do we find new customers and new demand? How do we put ourselves in the customer's shoes? So these aren't disparate processes or frameworks that you have to say, well, I'm going to do this one. You can do all of these because they're very synergistic. Most of these people who've created these tools obviously are just going to be touting their tool and how to use it. But there are very few consultants, people who've been educated on all of these. And I just happen to be one of those who has gone through and been trained and certified and spent years researching most of these tools. And what I've done is created a strategic framework, a logic model that actually can use all of these tools in a strategic planning engagement. So what does that look like? Well, I call it the customer-centered innovation framework. It's really, to me, nothing earth-shattering, but it basically brings together all the best practices and tools to be able to use them when it's appropriate. And we start with, as a strategic planning method here, assessing organization. And then we go all the way around to measuring and monitoring, right? So if you're doing strategic planning, the question is, how do we embed innovation into our strategic planning? And this is really one of my goals today, to tell you that you can do it. It doesn't have to be a disparate process. After that, we think about, gee, where we are now? How do we compete now? Where do we want to go? Which is what a lot of us do, sit around the boardroom and do brainstorming and, gee, what's next? And what's our new product or service? And then we figure out how do we get there. Hopefully then you do some testing and validation, you implement, deploy this new thing, and then you measure and monitor it. Well, what I want to walk through today are some of the tools that you can use to embed within your planning process, or hopefully even engage me and use something like this model that can help you start from the very beginning, even the culture and assessing your organization where you're at now. One of those tools is the Readiness Assessment. It's very simple, but what you could do as an organization is to go back with your leadership team and say, okay, we want to innovate. We know we need to do something else. That's great, but are we even ready to do something? And there's really three major areas that you want to look at. The first is leadership support. And you as a leader or your leadership team could say, yes, let's do this. All right, we want to do this. Well, then the question is, do you have resource allocation, right? Just saying you want to innovate is one thing, but do you put the resources and money into that investment, those initiatives? Do you have strategic guidance? Is the management committed? And at the top up here, hard to see, but everything from a 1 to 5 Likert scale, right? We're beginners or we're experts. And usually people are somewhere here in the middle, 2 to 3, right? We've done a little bit, but we're not very good at it. The second really section here is organizational design. So now we say, okay, you as a leader, you've committed, you've put some money and resources behind it, but is the organization structure actually set up in your business for you to succeed? So have you given legitimacy and power to these new innovation teams and what they're doing? Or is it, hey, Bob, after hours, when you have time on the weekend, go look at this new idea? Well, that's probably not going to work too well. Do those people that you've tasked with helping innovate and come up with the new ideas, do they actually have a bridge to your core resources? Whether you're a manufacturer, whoever, whatever you do, how do those people actually get resources or knowledge from your core capabilities so that they can use that? And then we all want to be rewarded. Is this just, hey, this is part of your job, we all want to survive, go spend 4 or 5 hours a week doing this, but you're not going to be incentivized? Or do you have incentives in place? And this is what you really need to have, because this is where new revenue streams come from. You need to work this into your strategic planning, your compensation, your quarterly goals. If people, OKRs, if you've heard this term, objective and key results, if you have your quarterly results and here's what we're looking at, great. How is innovation incentivized to be part of that? Otherwise, at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, we're all human. I've been in sales for 30 years. You're going to do what gets you paid. And your boss is going to say, where are my numbers, right? Because he's going to be looked at just for that versus what did you do to move us forward for innovation? And the last piece, great, you've got structure, you've got resource, you've got money set aside. Do you know what the heck you're doing? Innovation practice. Do you actually have the innovation tools? Have you been trained? Do you have the skill set, the knowledge to actually deploy and use these things to go into the market, get customer feedback, do experimentation, validate to reduce your risk that when you do launch something, it's probably going to succeed versus throwing it against the wall, which usually does not work. So these are the things to think about. And as you can see, here's an example. Go through, do your own checklist. And a goal would be not to try and boil the ocean, but pick 3 things where you're the lowest. And as a leadership team, then say, great, let's just work on improving these areas first to move us forward so that we can successfully innovate. And you as a leader, that's the key. And I would suggest each person in your team do this by themselves. You will get much different answers than you as an executive just telling them what the answers are that you think are the right way to go. That skin in the game will be a big help. So now that we've kind of assessed where we are, that first step, the culture, innovation, readiness, we can move over to the next step, which is great. Where are we now? How do we compete? Who do we compete against and with? So that we can set this baseline foundation of who we are and how we are different than our competition. You need to do that before you can innovate because you need a starting place. I think the best tool ever designed to do this is the strategy canvas in the Blue Ocean tool set. So Blue Ocean strategy is one of the leading theories and tools in the world. If you, just as a quick aside, Google Thinkers 50. Thinkers 50 is a group of leaders, scholars, consultants, authors that come together every year as a group to rank the leading 50 business minds in the world every year. So if you go to the website Thinkers 50, you will see the current day's who's who of management, right? You would have had Michael Porter there in the past, and all the great scholars and theorists and authors you've read. Now you'll see today who are considered the greatest business minds. In 2019, the #1 business minds in the world are the authors of Blue Ocean Strategy, Kim and Malburn. They're professors of INSEAD Business School. This is a 15-year-old theory, the book, in case you've read it, and it's still more applicable today than ever. What this shows is your value curve. Every business, every product, every service, every offering has a value curve. Your value curve is how you set yourself apart from somebody else. The question is, do you set yourself apart, or are you a me too? Pretend for a second the blue line wasn't there and you were just one of these red lines. Well, the red lines pretty much look like a me too. It's like when you do this, you say, yeah, I do that. In the competition, say, yeah, we do that too. Now my competition does that. Yeah, me too. You might be a little bit better in some areas. They might be better in others. The question is, how do you look to your customer? On the left-hand side here, we have, your offering level, how well you do at something, some piece of that offering, whether it's a financial service or it's a manufactured product that you sell. On the bottom, we have those competing factors. What are those 7, 8, 9, 10 factors that you believe are most important in your industry, that your customer decides whether to buy you versus your competition on? And these aren't features of your product. These are higher level competing factors, right? Availability of the product. Everybody has price. Maybe it's number of stores, maybe it's reputation, maybe it's customer service, maybe it's mobility. You have a delivery service. You have, all these different things depending on your industry. What's most important for your industry, for that specific product or service? That's the beginning stages of what I would recommend each of you guys do, or gals, is to map out your value curve as is currently. And you start with the competing factors on the bottom. And you basically come to an agreement. These are the most important features or factors for this specific product or service. And on the left-hand side, you say, gee, how well do we do that there? And low doesn't always mean bad. And you could say, risk, right? It could be bodily injury, a product or service. Well, if you're very low, you don't have a lot of risk to your customer. That's great. It could be low price. Price is literal. It's not a relative thing. So you just need to figure out what those things are, and then you draw where you think you are on this chart, and then you put the lines together, and that's your value curve. What we're showing here is what you want your value curve to be. This is your to-be canvas versus your as-is canvas. To-be takes a lot of work, right? You might say, gee, this is what we think can happen. Now we have to go out in the market. We have to validate it, do lots of customer experiments, discovery, reduce our risk before we spend a lot of time and money implementing something that we really don't know if it's going to work or not. And what this blue ocean canvas does is it shows you that each of these factors is a lever that you can pull or change to proactively change your value curve and separate yourself. As you can see here, this blue line is really different than the red lines. I would think all of you want to be that blue line. Well, that just does not happen by accident. You as a team have to look at each of these factors and say, maybe that was important in the past, but maybe now it's not so important, especially in COVID. Maybe our customers like that, but they don't have to have these features. But what they really want are these features. And they need some new things that we don't even offer, or a market doesn't even offer. Adding those things and really then raising your level of other factors sets you apart and creates a huge differentiation in your value curve. So after we've looked at kind of where we are, one of the other things I wanted to touch on was some more mindsets that are not just a tool, but really a pervasive way of thinking. And one of those is design thinking. As you can see here in my logic model in the middle, we've got the customer, and we've got things like empathy, defining the problem, ideating, prototyping, testing, implementing. Little things here you can hardly read: understanding, exploring, and materializing. Well, this inner wheel is actually design thinking. It's its own logic model framework. Started back actually in Stanford in the 80s, at Stanford Business School. And you might hear of terms like human-centered design as well. They're the same thing, design thinking. What is it? Well, it's really just a mindset of putting yourself in the customer's shoes, of trying to understand what they need, how they use a product or a service. And it really went back originally to physical products. The Apple mouse was one of the original products that the company called IDEA, which came out of the Stanford Business School, created. And it was, the form that fits in your hand, how many buttons are on there, the shape of it, how it moves and glides, right? Could be a hydro flask right here. I've got my thermos. The shape, the lid, all these things about product development is kind of how these things started. And you want to test how you use this, how you put yourself in the customer's shoes now for either an experience or a service. How does that happen? By doing that, you can then find the gaps, find the problems, because you're actually going through that buyer experience. Now you can ideate and brainstorm. Brainstorming is actually where a big part of design thinking, that is a core to it. And most of us do brainstorming incorrectly. So that would be a good off topic if you want to ask any questions about that. But this is just a mindset. There are some tools that perfectly integrate with this mindset of design thinking, putting yourself in the customer's shoes. The whole goal here is defining the customer's problems. A better way to think about the customer's problems is called jobs to be done. Some of you might have heard this term before, it might be new to others. But we always think about what's my customer problem, or my customer pain, or my customer need, or my customer want. All great terms, all have a little bit different context. But there's, over the last 15 years or so, 20 years almost, there has been a theory or a way to think about that incorporates all of them. And it's called jobs to be done. What's the customer's job they want to get done by using my product or service? And when you think about it in those terms versus a pain, a want, or a need, it becomes easier to talk about what the customer wants to get done. What job are they wanting to get done? And if you do HR service, you do financial planning, great. It's not just one job though. And we usually think of it in context of functional, right? I buy this hydro flask, right, to get what job? What's my job I want to get done? Well, I want to keep usually things cold. Maybe it's keep things hot. But what about the emotional and social jobs that I want when I buy this? Why did I buy blue? Well, I bought blue because this is my favorite color. Well, that's an emotional job, right? How do I feel when I'm using this in a certain circumstance? Or social. Think about if you bought a Tesla recently. If some of you on the line here are Tesla owners, you don't buy a Tesla usually for functional, right? We buy a car to get us from point A to point B. That's the functionality of a car. You buy a Tesla for emotional and social issues. Emotionally, you might want to feel that you're being green, you're being eco-friendly, you feel good about your purchase. And socially, you buy a Tesla because you want people to perceive you as being eco-friendly and green and cool and up to date, all these things. We don't go golfing because it's functional. We go golfing usually because it's social and emotional. We want to get away. What are the emotional and social reasons or jobs to be done that your customers have? You've probably only been focusing on the functional. And this is a great way to innovate. This is more of a mindset, this jobs to be done. The question then is there a tool that can help us in this? And the answer is yes, there is. The value proposition canvas is just a one-page canvas. It's a tool that really brings together jobs to be done. As you can see over here, customer jobs. what you would do here in a highly accelerated training would list all the jobs you think a customer is trying to get done: emotional, functional, social. Then you would list up here, when they get that job done or want to get that job done, what are the gains that they hope to get out of that? For me, I hope to keep my beverage cold or hot. I hope to have it with me in the car. I hope to not spill it on my computer, right? So it's in a container like this. What are the pains that you might be worried about of not getting this job done? Or when you do get the job done, what are the pains associated with that? Gee, I bought a Tesla. I'm worried that there's no charging stations. I'm worried that my battery is going to die, right? All these normal things. And on the left-hand side, this is you as the supplier, the vendor. What are my products and services I sell? And then what are my features that are really gain creators, or my features of my offering that are pain relievers? And the question is, do those map, the most important ones, to the customer's profile? And when you do that, that's what we call problem solution fit. Your solution maps to the customer problem and their job to get done. Now you have really discovery and validation, if you've gotten that customer feedback, that you have something worthwhile to innovate to. The last area I wanted to touch on was, we've gone through, where are we now? Where do we want to go? Customer needs. How do we get there? Well, we touched on business models before, and we'll touch on them again here. It's great that we now have validated some new customer needs, some jobs to get done. We put ourselves in their shoes. We know how we compete currently, but you've got to innovate your business model. How do we get there? Well, we have to make sure that all of these things are in sync. And a quick definition for some of you: your business model is how you create, deliver, and capture value. That's it. And your business plan is your business model. So let's say, that Hydro Flask here, they might say, gee, this is my product, this thing. Not really. Your product is your business model, because that's how you create, deliver, and capture value. And they all have to work together. And this is a business model canvas. And what we have here is you have 9 elements in your business model. On the right-hand side, it's about the customer. Who's the market? Who are the segments? What's the channel? How do you get there? Here in the middle is your unique value proposition. This is the thing that you sell. On the left is you as the company. Who are my partners? What are my resources? What do I do? New ways of putting these things together, right? My activities, all the things that I do internally. And then on the bottom here in the green, these are my costs and my revenues. Is it a subscription? Is it a SaaS model? Is it a brick and mortar transaction store? How do I actually get and monetize my business? When we understand our business model, we can then innovate to this. Maybe it's capturing value in a different way. Maybe you're a transaction right now, but you could move to a cloud-based SaaS model, a subscription. Maybe you have certain market segments you sell to now. How do we sell to different market segments? And if we do, then the question is, how do we actually get our products or services to them, right? We have this great new idea, but are our channels set up for that? Do we now need to go through distributors or OEMs? Are we going to sell just through Amazon or our website? Is it a brick and mortar store like Best Buy, right? How do we get our goods to them for this new product? And on the back end, do I need new partners, new suppliers? Do I need new skill sets to actually assemble something differently? Or if it's digital, how do I, use this new code, put things together? What are the new activities I need to do? And that obviously affects your cost. So understanding your business model is key to innovating, because all of these 9 areas are actually levers as well, just like your competing factors. Each of these is a way that you can innovate, and you just need to understand for you what that is, so that you have a starting point to innovate from. In summary, what we've talked about today is crisis creates opportunity. Disruption changes all of our jobs to get done, changes our needs, creates problems for us. We're looking for someone to solve those problems. We need to innovate to the customer's new needs to solve this. Whatever industry you're in, doesn't matter. Your customers are going to have new needs, some to a higher degree than others, right? Obviously, Zoom, and this is a great example, or restaurants, right, are easy examples that we're all living every day. Safety represents a new value. I only touched on this a little bit, that your customers, especially with COVID, getting back to specifically about COVID, we're all socially distant, right? We're all worried about transmission, and is it safe to be together? Do I pick my food up, right? Is it to go? All these different things, whether it's telemedicine or consuming movies right online. It's all about currently safety representing new value. Every industry is going to have to deal with this. So if you're used to sitting across the table, delivering goods one-on-one or services, how can you change your business model to represent this new value so that your customers see safety, right? Their experience is changed, but for the better. Using proven innovation frameworks and tools can help you on this path, right? This is how we looked at all these different ways of validating and reducing your risk. At the end of the day, you as a leader, reduce risk, reduce uncertainty, create differentiation. Is your organization set up to even allow innovation? We've looked at the Readiness Assessment. These are great places to start from. And it's great that you want to do something, but are you set up to actually allow that success? Focusing on jobs to be done is a way forward. And you need to adjust your value prop and your business model to enable innovation. And at the end of the day, we all need to reimagine what this new normal is. And these are some of the tools and frameworks and mindsets to help you innovate through COVID and not just survive, but thrive in the next normal. All right, let's open it up for questions. And I think we're great. We got a good 10 minutes of time for questions.
Yeah, Brian, we have some great questions here. One of them, is now a good time to launch a new business or start a new business offering during, a crisis?
Yeah, and as the data showed, McKinsey there, this is one of the best times to start a business, is in crisis. One, because we've shown proof, 1.5 million new applicants, double what was last year. And you saw obviously all the digital transformation examples. Every business or every industry has been affected, which means every industry has new needs. You as an entrepreneur, for starting a new business, can specifically just focus on those new needs. It's actually easier in many cases for an entrepreneur, a startup, to do that because they're laser focused on one thing, right? You as a current business are trying to focus on your core business and running it, looking at innovation. So sometimes that gets harder. But absolutely, right now is when your customers need new solutions the most.
Excellent. We have another question. What should I focus on during a crisis?
So we'll go back to the core of this whole message, which is the customer, right? So I'm assuming that question might have been early on, and it's all about the customer's needs. You need to focus on your customer's needs. And the hardest thing that any business, whether it's a startup or even massive business like Amazon or Intel, Costco, is validating customers' new needs. Nobody likes to go do customer interviews or go out and stand on the corner and ask people questions as they come out of the grocery store or create a survey online. It's hard work, and most of the time it's 90% negative, no's, no thank you, no thank you, no thank you. You have to do that. That's the biggest issue that we talk about when I work with startups as well, is you've got to get out of the building and go talk to people. There are no answers inside your building. All the answers are outside in the marketplace. You have to talk to customers, and the customers' issues are what you need to focus on.
Excellent. What tools or processes can I use to help me? And specifically, I'm going to combine that with a question, another question. Are the models that you showed, especially the business model canvas, are those different? They look very different than canvases we've seen before.
Good question. Some folks might be familiar with some of these. So I'll back up a little bit here and answer that. So this is the business model canvas, but you might have seen it in more looking like the gray one down here because it's from a company called Strategizer. Alex Osterwalder, I work with him, doing name drop now, but just to answer the question, is he created this about 10 years ago, the business model canvas. And it's usually, if you Google it, it's a free tool you can use, right? You'll see these boxes have 9 different, revenue will say revenue, cost will say cost. Here you'll see value proposition. Here you'll see customer market. Here you'll see channel. Here you might see customer relationship. This is the innovation, business model innovation, an infographic basically that talks about how can we look at innovating that business model? What are some ideas around innovating the model? And as an example, how do we unlock new market potential, right? So historically, you would say, here's my market, and list that segment. And then the question is, as a team, great, let's look at that element. Well, what about other segments, other adjacent markets? Maybe it's, we only were US based. Now we want to look at the world because we're going online, right? Digital transformation. Or maybe it was just Sacramento region and now we want to be all of California. How do we do that, right? So that is the business model canvas, but from a innovation perspective, color coding it. The other ones you can also Google. These are all free tools, right? So it's like accounting. Do you want to just go out and do it yourself with QuickBooks and learn? I'm giving you the names of these things, or do you want someone to help you, like a tax accountant, do your taxes, me come help you do strategy innovation. So these are all amazing tools. The Blue Ocean Strategy Canvas, the Strategizer Innovation Readiness. So Strategizer, Blue Ocean, Lean Stack for entrepreneurs, which is called the Lean Canvas, an offshoot of this. These are 3 of the leading companies that I work with that actually have created these tools and frameworks. Hopefully I answered that question enough. Happy to answer more.
Yeah, we have one more. How do we know that customer needs have changed? Other than the obvious, I mean, some of our businesses are still, plodding along decently, but in light of what you're talking about, that all customers' needs have changed, how do we identify those?
Yep, great question. And this is a key thing we didn't spend too much time on, but innovation has to be continuous. This isn't an event, it's a process. You need to embed innovation into your strategic planning. It's a continuous thing. It doesn't stop. It's like cybersecurity. You don't put in a firewall today and say, oh, I'm done with security forever, right? I mean, there's stuff that's always being updated, right? You don't go to the gym once and say, oh, I went to the gym, I don't need to go over again. It's a continuous thing. Innovation is no different. But back to I lost my train of thought there on the state the question again, so I want to make sure I answer it specifically.
Yeah, how do we identify that there's an issue with the customer's needs that we haven't necessarily noticed?
You have to continually be asking your customers, and it's not just asking them what they want. That's the wrong thing. The famous quote, if Henry Ford, if I asked people what they want, they would have said faster horses, right? Well, at the end of the day, that was really looking at customers know their problems, but they don't know the solution. So you have to ask them, what are your problems right now, especially with COVID? What are your needs? What has changed? What problems do you have now? Don't ask them, what do you want? Or what feature do you want? What can I do to help you? Ask them how they're using a product or service, what issues come up, and then not just by interviewing and asking, also observation. When you watch somebody use one of your products or services, you will gain way different insights than you do if you ask them how they use your product or service. And all of us right now could probably list 3 or 4 things on a piece of paper when you're at home and you jerry-rig something because it doesn't work the way you want it to, right? But if you ask me, oh, gee, Brian, how do you use this hydro flask? Oh, well, I fill it with water and I screw the top on and I just drink out of it. But you probably would watch me do it, and maybe I do something, you're like, well, gee, why are you doing that? And then I would be like, oh, because, you know, I have to do this because this doesn't quite work the way I want it to, right? And we all have those things at home where we're doing a workaround, right? We're jerry-rigging something. Your customers could be doing that on your product or service, and it could be not even your product or service. It could be upstream or downstream of your product or service. And this is another tool we call really the buyer utility map, which is what's the customer's experience in buying your product or service in the entire experience. So pretend we're GE. This is an easy one, right? I want to buy a washer and dryer. So GE makes the washer and dryer. So you might make that thing, right? But GE is not going to sell it to me. I have to go to Home Depot or Best Buy. So where do I buy it? And what's the pre-sales process, right? How do I get it delivered? GE is not going to deliver it. So do I get Best Buy or Home Depot or a third party to deliver it? Who's going to install it? Who's going to train me on how to use it? Who is going to warranty it? Is it GE? No, probably not. Probably a third party local provider. How about accessories and maintenance, hoses and tubes and, you know, obviously soap and things that I use with that product? GE is not making those usually. It's going to be a third party. And then disposal. So if I'm an 80-year-old woman on the second story of an apartment building and I want to buy a new GE washer, who's going to dispose of the first one for me? So in your ecosystem of products and services that you sell, we all have upstream and downstream partners in our ecosystem that do something. You might say, well, that's not my problem. No, but it's your customer's problem. They have a pain downstream or upstream that's preventing them from using your product or service the way that you think they should be using it, or not even using it at all because they're like, this is too much of an issue. I don't want to have to go buy it and hook it up and bring it home and deliver it and dispose of it myself. I'll use something else. So you've got to go ask them, observe them, and find out the new pains and needs, the jobs to be done that have changed, and to what degree have they changed. And once you understand their new problems, then you can create a solution to map to those problems.
Wow, it has been such, the time has flown and I've learned so much, and I'm sure that our audience has as well. So on behalf of our audience and myself, I want to thank you, Brian, for this time. Any unanswered questions at this point, we will work on getting answers from Brian. So watch for the email that comes out with the recording. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today.
Thank you guys all. Look forward to hearing from you. And I know many of you that are on here, so I appreciate you joining and look forward to any feedback, even if it's, you know, hey, this could have been done better, you know, positive or negative, you know, I like this slide, this didn't make sense. Please, if you have my email, shoot it to me. I'd like to understand that so I can always get better. And I think, let me get to the last slide in case some of you don't have my information. I meant to put that up there, but I look forward to hearing from you.
Also, just a reminder, if you do tag any sharing information from this webinar with pound or hashtag SI2, hashtag strategy, Brian is watching and he will appreciate that effort of yours and reach out to you for some time.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.